Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. So I saw this story, found it very interesting. So CBS Sports, they do a great job covering college basketball. Bluntly, it makes sense, right? They are the home of the NCAA tournament. But every year, two of their insiders, a couple guys I know and not well, but I respect both of them. Matt Norlander. I actually sat next to Matt Norlander at the Arkansas Duke game last year. Gary Parrish has been on this podcast, though not in a long time. But every single year, they kind of do, they go on the road in the summer recruiting events. They do what's called their Candid Coaches series, in which they basically offer coaches anonymity. And by the way, didn't think I was going to nail anonymity on the first try, but neither here nor there. Offer their coaches anonymity, and they ask them like the most pressing questions in all of college basketball at that time. And so at whatever, every year it's a little bit different. Sometimes it's about a big hire. Sometimes it's about who's going to be National Player of the Year. This year they did one on Cooper Flagg, whatever. Well, one topic that they hit on with these coaches was a fascinating topic with fascinating results that I want to talk about. That topic. They asked coaches who the coaches believe are the programs with the most NIL money to spend in college basketball. And so the coaches readily admitted, and I want to be transparent, CBS went out of their way to be transparent on this one as well, that like, look, nobody really knows for sure. Nobody's positive. This isn't the NFL. We don't know how much money is actually changing hands. This isn't the NBA. The contracts aren't public. But the coaches went on record sharing what they think to be the schools that have the most money to spend in NIL. I'm going to read you off the schools, and then we will react to them because I think there's some interesting names on this list. At number one, 73% of ballots this team appeared on. I don't know how many teams were on each ballot, but the Arkansas Razorbacks, overwhelming number one at 73.7%. Kansas, number two. BYU, which is interesting because we asked Kevin Young, their coach, about it the other day, is number three. We'll play what he had to say. Kentucky 4, Indiana 5, Kansas State 6, Baylor 7, Louisville 8, Alabama 9, Illinois 10, Texas Tech 11, Duke, UConn, Carolina 12, 13, and 14. And so I got a lot of thoughts on this, but let's go ahead and start at the top. So I'm not going to go through every single team, but let's start at the top because there are a couple things that really caught my eye on these topics. First of all, Arkansas at number one. Listen, I'll just be honest. I think that's probably the right answer, right? Like there are some schools that I fundamentally disagree with. And again, it's just people's opinions, but I don't think it's a big secret that Arkansas, like let me even put it this way. I don't know that the day before John Calipari got hired, that Arkansas had the best NIL in the country. I don't even know if in this previous portal cycle, Arkansas had the best NIL in the country. What I do believe is that going forward, at least for these first few years, I do believe that John Calipari is going to have as much money to work with as anyone in the sport. And transparently, if he feels like he needs more, I think it's very easy to get. I'll just give you some numbers that are floating around the college basketball space. First off, going into this past off season, I was told that like if you had about $3 to $4 million for your basketball roster, that you were actually in pretty good shape, or you thought you were in good shape going into the offseason. Now, what was crazy was people realized pretty quickly that the numbers and the players were going to go for a higher value than they thought. We all know that at the end of the summer, Coleman Hawkins was getting $2+ million. Great Osabor was getting $2+ million. But I think most people thought $3 to $4 million would get the job done, would put together a very nice roster for you in the offseason. Well, what's crazy, I have heard that going into this 2024-2025 recruiting cycle, I've been told John Calipari may have as much as $8 million to work with. So basically double the high-end NIL pools of a year ago. I think he's got double that, and I think it could get up to like $10 million if he really needed it. So Arkansas is number one. I'm not surprised. And transparently, I don't think it's like a big secret. They even referenced in that CBS article, like you could debate what are the best jobs in college basketball, but John Calipari wasn't leaving for a job where he wouldn't have the resources needed to compete at the highest level. So probably no surprise that they're number one. Kansas at number two is interesting because I don't know that I necessarily believe that Kansas has the second most money in NIL. Now, what I do believe is that in this specific cycle, the previous cycle, so this past spring and summer, I do think they were probably working with about as much money as anybody, but it's because of what we talked about all spring. Bill Self basically acknowledged the day the NCAA tournament ended. I've been thinking about last season. I've been thinking about next season for about a month now. And so to me, that speaks to probably knew about mid to late January, I ain't got a team that's good enough. And Bill Self is a smart guy. You can like him, you can hate him, whatever. But behind the scenes, he was working to make sure that when portal season came, he had the resources to compete at the highest level. And so I don't know if that's an every year over year thing. Obviously, Bill Self, Hall of Famer, built up plenty of equity. And so I think he's going to be just fine. I think what's interesting about Kansas too, by the way, certainly I think some of their transfers, high profile guys certainly command a lot of money. But what I also find interesting, like Hunter Dickinson strikes me as the kind of guy that probably will get some national TV deals, national sponsorship deals, fifth-year guy, former All-American, everybody knows him. So when you look at this, I think what people are saying is, and what people were asked was specifically how much money is in the collective. I don't know if Kansas is number two. They're up there. My guess would be that they're not number two. And I think because of the brand, they can probably get some stuff outside of Kansas. I think Hunter Dickinson would be an obvious one there. Third one, BYU, is very interesting, okay? So BYU, obviously, we've talked a lot about BYU over the course of this summer, and it's because they have the new coaching staff led by Kevin Young. The new head coach came from the NBA. And what I would say is it's been no secret that their NIL setup is pretty good. They've been transparent about Ryan Smith, the owner of the Utah Jazz, has taken care of them financially in a way that really kind of helps the program. But what's funny about the BYU situation, rather than me telling you what I think and what I may have heard, we asked Kevin Young about this when he was on the pod. Now, we're going to play the video in a minute. He gave a very long answer. Let me paraphrase it before we get to NIL specifically. Because I asked him, I said, you guys are recruiting at a historic level for BYU. What do you say to people that say it's only about NIL? And he said, look, it's a three-pronged approach. One, we play in the Big 12. Players want to play against the best competition in college basketball. In my opinion, there is zero doubt that plays a role in our success. Two, he said, I come from the NBA. We have an NBA structure. We have an NBA training staff, an NBA nutrition staff. We have an NBA developmental staff. And he said that has appealed to a lot of players. But he did specifically talk about NIL, and here's what he had to say.
Piece is what we've, and when I say we, our collective has been able to do is they've just been able to help us be competitive with the other schools in the country.
Sure.
So there isn't a deficit from other schools in the country to BYU. We're on the same playing field, and I give our guys credit for that. That's basically what has happened. It's been like a three-headed monster right now.
That was Kevin Young, the BYU head coach. Sorry about that, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube. I did have a headphone in, but it was because I was listening to make sure that I heard what he was saying. But that was Kevin Young. And all I would say is, and I haven't heard this specifically from him, I do think that people in that building think the NIL, I don't know how to say it right, but I think they believe some of the NIL conversation about them has been a little bit overblown. In other words, what he said, they've helped us be competitive, but they also offer a lot, right? Again, NBA setup, whatever, Big 12. And I was basically told, yeah, there were some kids that we spent a lot of money on, but there were a lot of kids that we had to say no to that came to us and basically said, hey, this is our price. And we just said, we don't have the budget for that. Good luck getting it elsewhere. And so you look at some of those kids like a Cannon Catchings. Remember, Cannon Catchings was the 4 or 5 star guy that people are projecting as a first round pick, was committed to Purdue, decommitted. I can't say for sure, but my understanding is they were not the highest bidder. But that kid looked at the situation at BYU, looked at the professional setup and said, you know what? I got an opportunity to go do something special there. I got an opportunity to develop into a pro. So it's interesting hearing from one of the coaches on this very topic. Really quickly, some of the other schools, Kentucky at number 4. I don't think they probably had the fourth best NIL, fourth most money. Listen, I think clearly Mark Pope had access to some dollars and cents that maybe John Calipari, actually not maybe, certainly would not have had if he had stayed at Kentucky. And that's okay. Kentucky boosters, spend your money how you please. John Calipari had not lived up to expectations in the NCAA tournament. I understand. But obviously, look, to put together the roster that Mark Pope did with the players that he did, with veteran guys that are transparently looking for a great opportunity, but also great payday. I mean, Kobe Bryant didn't come for nothing. Amari Williams didn't come for nothing. Lamont Butler didn't come for nothing. I believe they're probably in the top 4, 5, 6. I don't know if they're at number 4. I don't know if they're at number 6, but I would guess they're in the top half. A couple other teams from that list that I think maybe are a little too high and a little too low. One, Baylor at number 7. I don't believe that Baylor is I think Baylor is probably higher than they're given credit for on that list. You think about Baylor, listen, Scott Drew, remember, what was the story of the offseason with Scott Drew? Interviewed for the Louisville job. We believe he spent some time really seriously considering, do I actually leave for Louisville? Decides to stay. That's important because what it means is he got probably a little bit of an NIL boost there. And then, oh, by the way, Kentucky opens 2-3 weeks later. He's the overwhelming favorite to get the job. He turns them down. And my understanding was when he turned them down, it wasn't just, hey, we're coming back because it's a feel-good story. He said, no, if you want me to come back, I need to be able to compete at the highest levels, and I need some help financially. And so I believe a lot of that money that was raised was because he did turn down Kentucky, because he did turn down Louisville. And I look at what happened at Baylor after that. You get Jeremy Roach, you get Norchad Omier. Those are two guys. Remember, Jeremy Roach was the multi-year starter at Duke. Norchad Omier was a 2-year starter at Miami. So if some guy's leaving Miami, he ain't coming for cheap based on how we know they spend NIL money there. And if you're getting a guy from Duke, it ain't going to be cheap either. So to me, Baylor, I'd guess probably top 3 to 5 based on what I've heard. They have plenty of money, at least for this cycle. The other one that I think is interesting, probably too low, and you can see the list at the bottom of the screen if you're watching on YouTube, Kansas State. I'll be honest. I don't know who the money people are at Kansas State, but whoever they are, they're spending it and they're not afraid, okay? Coleman Hawkins, we discussed it a minute ago. He is in that $2 million range. We believe he was the highest paid player of the portal cycle this offseason. But then also you look at Kansas State. Remember, look at all these high school basketball players that are cutting their lists. Look at how many of them have Kansas State. And this is not a disrespect. By the way, this is not a disrespect in any way, shape, or form to Kansas State. But A.J. DeBonsa has Kansas State in his top 7. You ain't getting A.J. DeBonsa for free. And so you got to have the money. You got to have it lined up. They made the cut there. Malik Thomas, we talked about him the other day, was trending towards UConn early. UConn has faded. I think it is a lot about NIL, where UConn's just like, look, we got a budget. We ain't going over for you. That's no disrespect. We need to move on to some other people. Well, Malik Thomas, Arkansas is in the mix, but Kansas State, I've been told, is neck and neck with them as well. Darren Peterson, the 5-star, who I think will ultimately end up at Kansas, has Kansas State on his. I mean, every kid that's cutting his list has Kansas State. So I think Kansas State probably is in really good shape. I think Louisville probably in really good shape. Pat Kelsey, I think, did a very good job of raising money when he got there. I found it interesting, by the way, on the other end, that Duke, Carolina, and UConn are not deemed to be in the top 10. By the way, Alabama at number 9, I think might be a little bit high. I think Nate Oates has been transparent as we have money, but we're not spending it recklessly. You want to come here, you're coming here to play basketball, to develop, to be a pro. My guess is they're probably not in the top 10. I think Illinois probably is a few spots higher. But then again, 11, 12, 13, or what was it, 12, 13, 14. Duke, UConn, North Carolina. What's interesting there, of course, is that every time Duke signs a 5-star, it's just about the money. They're just going because of the money. Not according to coaches. Carolina as well. Carolina is kind of interesting because they're in the mix for a lot of these guys. They haven't closed on a lot of them, but we're told the money is good, right? Like when they lost Cliff Omoyori to Alabama, we were told Cliff Omoyori took a pay cut to go to Alabama when he could have gone to Carolina. So interesting list. I know we don't really know, but it doesn't change the fact that it is a fascinating, fascinating list. And man, oh man, I found a lot of very interesting stuff on that list.